Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV. Welcome to episode 7 of The Rest is Giant Robots, where we're going to talk about some stuff we don't normally talk about. So I'm Andrew Wildman, artist and comics, movies, blah, 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 blah. And
I'm Simon Furman, comics writer on Transformers and many other things, many movie franchises as well, things like RoboCop and Terminator. So we can touch on
nice.
that when we
Yes, definitely.
get into it a little more. So we won't completely diverge from comics, which is kind of the plan.
Right. So what was shall we just jump straight in with the movie thing?
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
maybe just a word of, we're going to talk about movies this time. You know, we'll get back on track and talk about our careers and things, but we've both been to the cinema recently and to see different movies and had slightly different experiences, I think. And I think it made us want to sort of go back and talk about some of the movies that were big and influential to us, before our comics careers, during our comics careers, because movies have changed a lot, and I think it's worth just backtracking a bit as well as looking at what's in the cinema these days.
Yeah, I think so. Because movies are a very big influence on comics anyway. I mean, well, I guess they always have been, not necessarily pre kind of American comics, but I mean, yeah. So back in the day, I mean, some of the British comics weren't necessarily like I'm thinking way back when, kind of London Illustrated News and all those kind of Ali Sloper, all that kind of stuff probably wasn't influenced by movies because there probably weren't any.
Yeah,
But yeah, they are as a visual kind of narrative medium. I think they very much are.
yeah.
And obviously over time we've had a number of movies that are directly movie versions of comics, and some that are influenced by comics, and some influenced by or movie versions of graphic novels that a lot of people wouldn't even realize
Mm.
were graphic novels. Not that necessarily we'll touch on to all of those, but there's certainly been a big influence on me, and I know they've been a big influence on you, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with you. What was your most recent cinematic experience that maybe has a little bit of resonance with what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, okay. Well, the most recent film I saw was Joker Folie à Deux. Um, which I went into, with some reservations because I had heard I saw the first Joker film,
Mm.
which I thought was great.
Yep.
Something I'll touch back on, for me, of all the superhero movies, but all the kind of the Marvel slash DC movies that there have been, for me, the ones that had always stood out and I thought were kind of valid as like proper movies in inverted commas and will stand the test of time were the Joker and Logan,
Mm.
the Wolverine movie. And recently there have been two movies that have come along and sort of followed on from those. So the one that I saw a couple of nights ago was Joker Folie à Deux. I really enjoyed the first one. I thought it was just great in so many ways because it was a proper movie.
Mm.
It wasn't jokes, it wasn't cartoony, it wasn't, you know, just not pandering to, but just it wasn't just there to satisfy the fans. It wasn't one of those films that is basically a big trailer to the next one that's going to come after it. All the kind of
Mm.
stuff that you could criticize some of the other movies for. It was good. It was gritty. It was a top draw actor,
Mm.
um,
And
and so I really loved it.
psychologically interesting as well, which sometimes they're just
Very much.
not. I mean, the first Joker had something to say, it felt, and
Yeah.
you didn't always think I'm watching a comic book movie with this. It felt on a
No.
different level.
It very much did. I mean, in two ways. One, that if you did feel like you were watching a comic book movie, it wasn't a comic book movie. It was more like a Vertigo graphic novel. That's the
Mm,
territory we were in.
yeah.
Um, and so going into Florida, because I'd heard all this stuff about it being a musical, which is like, okay. Um, and certain, there had been walkouts, I know. So we've got a cinema here in the town where I live, which is a little independent cinema. They've got two cinemas, one in Liphook and one here. Um, and it's called the Living Room Cinema. And it's very nice. It's all armchairs and all that kind of stuff. And I when they were putting the project together, I signed up as a founder member. The advantage being, which costs quite a lot of money to become a founder member, but the
Mm,
advantage being that it meant that as a member, I could go and see any movie I like, don't have to pay for it at all. Essentially, I'd already paid for it. I'd kind of
yes.
pre-booked anything and everything. With a
Great.
plus one, I could take somebody with me,
Mm,
which is also always great. Um, and also the other thing I get, they have on the chair, the nice armchairs, there's like a little attached to it. There's like a little kind of table,
mm,
if you will,
yeah.
where you can put your beer or your wine or your coffee or whatever.
Nice.
And so I have a little plaque in one of those where it says Andrew Wildman, storyboard artist. And that turned up. So they've been saying that they were going to do that for a long, long time.
Mm,
And I kept saying, when am I going to get my plaque? When am I going to get my plaque? And they said, yeah, soon. They're going to come soon. We're going to do it. Which seat do you want? And I knew exactly which seat I wanted it to be, which was seat A5 in screen one, which is right in the middle,
mm.
front row with a massive footrest that you can
Oh,
put your, and
perfect.
yeah, exactly. And it's not like right in your face. The screen is far enough back that it doesn't, send you into a kind of, I don't know, whatever, tailspin. Um, anyway, so I went to see Joker Folie with my daughter, Carrie,
Yep.
proper grown-up daughter. I mean, she's got her
Yes.
own kids, she's not a child, so it wasn't going to freak her out. She was really looking forward to seeing it.
Hmm.
She is a Lady Gaga fan, so so that was an added bonus for her. And and we walked in and we were the first ones into the screening room. There's only like 50 seats in each
Hmm.
of these two screens. And she said, where are we sitting? I said, oh, we're sitting here. And she said, oh, don't you want to sit in this seat? I was like, no, you can sit there. She said, but it's got your name on it. And I was like, finally, because I didn't even know it was there. It's like, but
Excellent.
I let her sit in that one. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Joker Folie à Deux, yeah. So I didn't really know what to expect, and I don't want to spoil anything, but the whole opening sort of sequence scene, if you like, is an animation. It's
Okay.
like, wow. And it's a very kind of retro style animation, almost like 60s, 50s
Mm,
even, very, very old school looking animation. Which I thought, okay, so we're straight in with like slightly different. I knew
mm,
this was going to be a very, very different movie. So that was fine, and then that finished, and then we're sort of into the movie proper. Um, and like the first one, yes, there's a lot of psychological content in there, and it does do a deep dive into what's his name? Arthur Fleck, isn't it, or something? I think they call him Arthur. I think his actual real name in
yes.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so it's into his kind of psychosis and all that kind of stuff, and the prison scenes are a bit one flew over the cuckoo's nest kind of scenario, which is
Hmm.
fine and it's great. Acting is amazing. Joaquin Phoenix is really good, and Brendan Gleeson plays the prison guard, like the main prison guard in it, and
Mm,
he's always
yeah.
good. So it's a quality movie, well shot, well graded, good acting. And then when we get to the musical parts, I don't know whether people missed the point here because I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, they've just suddenly broken into song. Um, there is a scene where Arthur there's a music class and him and the prison guard who also likes just singing,
Mm,
just like to himself, pub singer, whatever. There's a music class that some of the some of the other inmates go to because it's good therapy. So they go along and they just kind of like sing a song. But that's all. I mean, it's just something that could crop up in any film. But the big musical numbers are where we go onto a deep dive into the Joker's psychosis.
Mm.
So the singing, all the singing and sometimes dancing doesn't occur in the real world of the movie.
Right.
And that's what makes it, for me, not a musical.
No.
It's just a narrative device that they're using to express what Arthur is feeling inside his psychosis and how
Mm.
that's playing out for him and how his relationship in his own head with the Harley Quinn character, who's also an inmate
Hmm.
at the prison, who he meets, um, that sort of musical aspect of it inside his own head. It's only in his own head that kind of expresses how he feels for her and how he thinks she feels for him.
Okay.
But in the real world of the movie, it's all very, very different. It's very much like the first Joker movie, but actually has more to say about his psychosis. And the end of the movie is just like, wow, what, wow,
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing it. The funny thing is that side of it didn't put me off at all, and
yeah,
now even less so. Now I kind of understand it a bit more. But
yeah,
I thought the first one was non-formulaic anyway, so I don't really mind if this one goes off in another non-formulaic way because one of the things I'm struggling with a lot in movies now is how formula they are. How
yeah,
afraid to deviate from, you know, the pattern they think is what is appealing to people, the two audiences.
yeah,
So yeah, no, I mean it sounds like one I will catch definitely, and I will catch it in the cinema because increasingly that's something I do less and less.
yeah, yeah. And it's something that I increasingly do more and more. Now, now I can just walk down the road and sit in an armchair and watch
Yeah,
a
with
movie
with your name on it.
with my name on it. Yeah. With chosen kind of, plus one with me.
Yeah.
Um, so it's either, my wife or a family member watching a film like that, or, some other essentially grown-up film, or it's during half term where I'm sitting there watching like Kung Fu Panda with one of the grandkids.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's what grandkids are for, really, isn't it? So you can
Yeah,
go and see these movies with a clear conscience.
yeah, yeah. As many times as I like.
Exactly, yeah. So my most recent cinema outing was to see Alien Romulus, the latest in
Oh,
the long-running Alien franchise saga.
yeah,
And
which I haven't seen, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you're.
yeah, well, I mean, I was keen to see it at the cinema because I think the Alien movies often work best on a big screen. You see them at home,
Mm,
it's never as good as seeing them on a big screen and having the jumps and the sort of just being in the moment with it. Because generally, the best ones of them are pretty relentless.
mm,
You're pulled into it and you come out the other end and go, phew. And, to its credit, this one was very like that. It is, they all through it, in fact, to an almost annoying degree, they keep referencing, not always appropriately, the previous movies, the kind of original Alien, the
yeah.
Aliens, some of the other ones. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And, I didn't have a huge problem with that. What I had a problem with is I kept measuring it in my head against the original Alien or even
Mm,
Aliens. And it's it's like the pitch has changed. So instead of a slow build of tension, it's they don't think audiences, and I think it's this one was quite aimed, I think, at a young teen, young adult audience
mm.
because most of the characters are that age. It feels like
Okay.
a younger pitched movie. And it was almost like we don't trust our audience to sit still unless we get on with things really, really quickly, to the point
Right.
where some of the rationale of how they get to this space station and why is just like, what? No, hang on. So that's just up there and nobody else's. Anyway, there were lots of those things which I try and ignore, but my storytelling brain won't let me when I'm watching films these days. But I felt there was a general, not it's not a bad film at all, Alien Romulus. I enjoyed it. It's a somewhat roller coaster ride of a film. And there's some great sequences, one in a sort of elevator shaft, which I thought was particularly good. But it's
Mm,
almost like the filmmakers are going, our audience now is 17, 16 to 20, early 20s, and their attention span won't let them just build into a movie. We're going to get that going as soon as possible and throw everything at you right away. And I was just thinking back to the original Alien, which is a
mm,
real slow burn.
mhm,
It's like they wander off to that alien spacecraft. John, after a little bit of moving around, John Hurt gets infected, and then you think, oh, no, nothing happens, and then it all kicks off. But it's almost like half the movie in Alien
mm,
before you get the first hint of an actual alien.
mm,
But I just think now
mm.
they think audiences don't have that kind of, we'll go with the flow here. We'll let you bring us along slowly into it. And I think that was my biggest beef with Alien Romulus. It was just get them up there quickly as possible, get an alien out of its stasis or something and have them chasing around, and it's instead of a face hugger, it's 100 face hugger things. It's, in
Yeah.
it instead of, the spidery things, it's lots of those. It's more than, it just kind of just it was like, oh God, it throw everything at it and see what sticks. And definitely there was a little bit of box tickiness about it, about the cast and the issues about the cast and some of the things it was tracking, on the personal level. And then they just basically kill everyone. So, it's hard to sort of it's
Yeah.
hard to sort of go along with a lot of it. It made me think about movies in the 70s and the 80s that just to me just took more time and were less formula, less, you know, they expected more out of the audience, I guess. So
Mm.
so my question to you is, you know, are there sort of films that, were big influences on you, on, you know, your creative side, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and Alien. I mean, for many of us in this industry, Alien is a big influence. Just just slightly tracking back. So you're saying about the difference between them, which is kind of what that's how it is now, isn't it?
Mm,
Everybody wants everything fast and furious.
yeah.
I guess the advantage with the in hindsight, the advantage with the original Alien film is that there was nothing before it. So to have a slow burn towards the big reveal and the horror made built that tension. I guess
Mm,
you can't do that now. Everyone's like, when are the aliens going to show up?
yeah.
Because they already know that that's what it's about. And I guess maybe even the film Aliens, which is also a big influence on a lot of people of our generation. I guess that kind of accelerated the appearance of them.
Mm,
And that multiplied the number of, kind of up to the ante, turn the dial up on everything.
yeah.
I guess they're just constantly doing that. So yeah, certainly Alien. I saw it in the cinema when it first came out. So what was it, 79, I think?
Yep, that sounds right.
79. Um, so I was 18 at that point, as I guess you were as well.
Mm.
So just old enough to actually qualify to go and see it. I saw it in a wonderful old cinema that used to be in the town where I grew up in Bedford. They had a fantastic cinema, which is not there anymore. But my brother, who's a couple of years older than me, was in the RAF, and he'd seen it in the town where he was based, and he'd come home for the weekend, and he said, "I've just seen this film back at back in RAF Lynham near there," and he said, "You've got to see it. It's like nothing you've ever seen before." He said it's pretty horrific. It's kind of a sci-fi movie, but not like anything you'll have seen before. So I was like, what is this going to be? And watching it, I could not believe the intensity and the darkness
Mm,
that was just going on in front of me. It was phenomenal.
yeah.
I mean, I suppose I don't know whether I already had a copy of Necronomicon, Giger's Nec. I don't think I did. Maybe that was afterwards. But certainly all the design work in it. So for me as a as a creative, and then 79 was when I was my first year at art college. So
Mm,
but I saw the film before I started at art college. So this was like unleashing all sorts of, oh my God, this is incredible
mm,
creative thoughts in my mind. Um, but I think it's probably similar with you. For me, those early movies, because of who you are at the time that you see them, and because you didn't have the kind of pre-promo, certainly no kind of social media clips of whatever, all of it. The most you'd ever see would be a clip of it on Barry Norman's, film 79 or whatever, his kind of film program back then on TV. Um, but that would be it. So your expectations were just like,
yeah.
quivering.
Yeah,
Um,
and also trailers back then used to be less, these days trailers, where I try not to watch trailers anymore because they put everything in. It's like the whole movie in some of them, and you're thinking, oh, so all the surprises and often some of the best lines you've seen in the trailer, whereas I don't remember that in trailers for things like Alien at all.
no.
I think
I
they
think the
were,
Alien trailer was literally just like fast cut
mm,
clips of some just like scenes, people running down corridors or whatever, with
mm,
just some music behind it, and then boom,
yeah,
with the egg, and then in space, no one can hear you scream. And it's
mm,
like, why would you not go and see that? I mean,
yeah. Yes, and again, that to me is that symptom of that thing of, not, it's like you have to almost drag, they feel they have to drag the audiences in by giving them almost the whole movie in a trailer. And
yeah.
trailers used to be a lot more suspenseful, a lot more, as you say, if they were going to show you stuff, it was often in a sort of montage of fast clips, so they you didn't really spoil anything.
Mm, mm.
So
So you
yeah,
get a sense of the flavor, but not necessarily of what was coming up. Um, but
you know,
yes, we didn't see many trailers, and also I think, if I'm not very much mistaken, back then, back in the 70s and 80s, maybe you picked up a bit, but there weren't as many movies anyway around as there are now, I don't think.
no, possibly not. I mean, I used to go and see a lot of movies. I was like somewhat addicted to the cinema, especially in the 70s as a teenager, to the
Yeah.
point where I couldn't always get people to come with me. I mean, we all like going to see a movie, but I was slightly, God, I've got to see that, and I've got to see that, and I've got to see that. And not everybody always wanted to come with me. So I would quite happily take myself to the cinema on a Saturday afternoon and
Mm,
watch something, you know, I saw Good, Bad, and Indifferent. But the 70s was an interesting time because there was a lot of different kind of film out there. And in
mm,
the sci-fi realm, there was quite a lot of slightly dystopian, slightly, we've screwed up the whole world cinema, and the aftermath of that. And and often they starred Charlton Heston. He just seemed to be in a lot of those ones. But I remember going to see the one that I saw lots of films around that time, but I remember seeing Jaws, as I'm sure we all do,
Mm,
and that made a big impact on me, as just how, you know, shocking some bits of it was. And, I went to see but I went to see Rollerball, a very, I was just about old enough for double A films as they were graded at the time.
mm,
And Rollerball had sort of, it had some press where they just said, in the Daily Mail or something like that, oh, this is the most violent movie ever, and we think it's shocking and going to corrupt the youth of today and all that. So I had to see it, and
mm,
it's a strange movie because basically the whole gist of Rollerball is there's this massively violent sport played out on a sort of roller arena, a circular roller arena. And it's a sort of panacea for the masses. It's to stop people going to war. They give them this ultra violent sport as a spectator
mm.
thing. So they've more or less stopped wars by giving everybody this outlet for their sort of violent instincts. And
Mm,
it's a great concept and something I rolled on into other things in my own writing. And
mm,
but the film itself is kind of strange because you've got the very violent, very exciting bits of game interspersed with these really quite sort of odd and art housey science fiction sequences of the world at the time. And you're
mm.
more or less just sitting there going, tapping your fingers, going, can we get to the next game, please? I'm slightly bored with this bit. But flawed or not, it made a huge impact on me. And around it, there were other films like Soylent Green and Planet of the Apes, uh, and again, lots of Charlton Heston films. Bizarrely, he was
Mm,
just in a lot
mm.
of those, and they were all slightly, we Soylent Green is a interesting sort of near future sci-fi things, and the sort of reveal in it is quite horrific, and
Yeah.
I just don't think they do it these days. But but that's what I liked about the 70s. There were almost no particular rules, no particular formula. I'm sure if you put that formula over a lot of the films, you'd get the same thing. But I think largely people were just experimenting with film much more, and I
Yeah,
was
they were. Yeah.
and we had a little cinema in Croydon near where I grew up called The Focus that used to do double bills of earlier 70s films that I'd been too young to see. So,
Mm.
the dollar westerns, even though those were 60s films, the Dirty Harry films, things like that. I just got to sort of catch up on as double bills. So I was a voracious consumer of films at the time.
Yeah, yeah. We had a cinema in Bedford, not the main one. I think there were three cinemas in Bedford, and the one in town, which was very much the kind of flea pit cinema, as they used to call them, kind of grubby and whatever, quite dingy. Yeah, they used to show double bills, and they used to show double bills of Bond films, of the early Bond
Mm,
films, and that was great. So I used to, yeah, you'd see. Um, Thunderball and You Only Live Twice back to back,
mm.
which is just fantastic. Just to
It
consume all
was.
that on a wet afternoon.
And that's something else that's disappeared, the double bill. That used to be, very rarely did you go and see one film. It often had a supporting film of some sort,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
two films just put together, in a double bill.
yeah.
It was such a good time for
I
films
suppose they
that
were the B movies, weren't they? They were the
mm,
ones that would sort of just back up the thing. But I don't think movies were as long then as they are
no,
now, were they? I mean,
no,
some of them did get very long, the grand sweeping epics that they were, but
mm,
those slightly more gritty movies that we had in the 70s with new like punk directors like Scorsese and all those kind of guys who were just making
Mm.
gritty movies. They didn't drag on.
No, I mean,
Um,
generally, 90 minutes was the rule of thumb. I'm sure there were longer and shorter, but,
mm,
you look at some of the movies that I remember, like, the early Spielberg stuff like Duel,
yeah,
the truck, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's under 90 minutes. And, there's a lot to be said for a movie under 90 minutes because you're just,
yeah,
pulled in and along and, there's no need for a bathroom break, sort of halfway through.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, it's very concise storytelling as well, isn't it? For
mm,
the movie maker, get in there, kind of say what you need to say, and compress it all, rather because very often the one of the comments you hear a lot from film critics about quite a number of movies these days, which are 2.5 hours or whatever, is even if they're only 2 hours, very often they say, you know, the the beginning of the third section was a bit baggy or whatever.
mm,
And that's a word that certainly Mark Kermode uses. It was very baggy, or it was a bit loose, or
mm.
they could have got through that quicker. And sometimes they do feel a bit padded, and they do slow down. And when that happens in a movie, that's when you realize that you really need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, you shouldn't ever sort of really come out of that, little tunnel you're in with a movie. So,
No.
yeah, and
Mm,
I think that continued into the 80s. I mean, the 80s, or certainly the early 80s, was another great time. I remember, obviously you had RoboCop and Predator and one of my favorite films of the early 80s, another big influential one was The Warriors, which was a
mm,
film by Walter Hill, who did superb movies generally. And
mm,
he was just very, very energetic and get to the point. And, one of his earlier ones, Southern Comfort, was another big influence on me. A group of, you know, uh, sort of National Guards go out into the Louisiana swamps and more or less
yeah,
get picked off by the locals. It,
yeah,
and it's a film that I'm sure it's probably only 90 minutes, but you just pulled through it. And the same with Warriors, really great premise. Street gang goes to a big conference of street gangs. There's a killing. They're blamed. They have to fight their way back from the Bronx to Coney Island.
yeah,
It's really simple idea and brilliantly
yeah.
executed. In a series of set piece sort of fights. And
Mm.
I remember coming out of that movie completely kind of enervated, I guess. It was just such a sort of adrenaline rush.
I can remember going to see Warriors. I remember nothing about it because I haven't seen it since. I saw it once in the cinema, never
Mm,
seen it again. The only thing I remember is the person holding bottles on his fingers and
yes.
then clinking the bottles
Yeah,
together. That's
that's
the only
right.
thing I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. Warriors come out to
Come
play.
out to
Yeah.
play. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, great film and definitely one that, it's I can kind of feel in my writing the influence of a lot of those sort of mid to late 70s and early 80s movies that,
Mm,
really were a big deal. And then, there are ones like the Terminators and the first RoboCop that,
mm.
wow, a bit later I got to do RoboCop comics and couple of Terminator series for Dynamite. And this
Yeah.
was just, wow, living the dream, being able to sort of go into those franchises and
Mm.
do something of my own with them. Brilliant. It's just
Were
so
there
great.
any? Yeah, you mentioned RoboCop, so yeah, kind of. We need to talk. We need to touch on some kind of robot aspect of movies, maybe, just to keep it a little bit relevant. Were there any movies back then that probably even, yeah, so pre-Transformers, I guess, was there anything that made you have an interest in robots, robotics,
Hmm.
mechanoids, whatever, or whatever version? I'm trying to think of any movies apart from The Day the Earth Stood Still, with the
Yes.
giant
Yeah. That's
robot
a
in
that's
that,
a
but
biggie, I would say.
mm,
That was always a very interesting film anyway. But yeah, it had an interesting robot in it. But I mean, strangely, it's not movies so much. But I used to watch a TV series called Lost in Space
oh yeah,
avidly as growing up. And that, of course, has a robot in it, the same robot, more or less, as in Forbidden Planet.
mm,
But you know, yeah, I mean, I think I love that. I mean, obviously, huge fan of, I know it's not exactly robots, but Blade Runner and the idea of
mm,
androids and artificial, robotic beings. But yeah, I mean, there's so many, I once did a book for a small publishing company called Rad Robots. It was their title, not mine. But basically, it was just robots in popular culture, mostly in cinema, but also, a little bit in literature and even history.
mm,
Automatons, sort of from classical mythology, of which there are a few and
mm,
things like that. So, it was interesting delving into it, just how many films, you know, had some kind of robot element to them that I hadn't even really thought of much. There's a Tom
yeah,
Selleck film called Runaway, a slightly future cop film where there were sort of a lot of spidery robots in it that, are
mm,
going around killing people. It's just, yeah, it was great. And I don't think I particularly was thinking, wow, I really want a career writing robots. But, you know, once I sort of started, I realized I had a lot to draw on just from the movies I'd been watching anyway.
yeah. I guess one of the differences, with everything from Transformers onwards and anything similar around the time of Transformers, that's different from the kind of stuff that came before it, like some of the characters and products that you mentioned then, is that, I mean, something that I always say about Transformers. I did a lecture at a school a few days ago, and and Transformers came up because I was talking about, things that I've worked on, etc., etc. Um, and I always say that Transformers are not robots, and people are like, "Oh, it says
Mhm.
robots in the title," kind of thing. Um, I say, yeah, but essentially they're not robots. If you look at the definition of a robot and how, you know, when that kind of name was first coined, the whole thing about robots is that they they just run on whatever. They have like a single thing to do, and they just do it. What makes Transformers not robots is the fact that they are sentient. They're beings, sentient beings. They're not robots in the way that robots had always been described up until that point.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
back then, yes, they very much were just clunky, walk
mm,
around, shoot stuff. You know,
yeah, I mean, Transformers was difficult that they were different. They were machine life forms, which
yes,
was quite different. And I think it's part of the reason why I wanted to, in the cartoon series of Transformers, they were built by the quintessence and then gained sentience. And that
right.
never sat well with me. I thought, oh, if they're just built, then they are just robots who have gained sentience. So
Mm,
that was why when we got to do our own little comic version of the origin, I changed that completely, and they were these sentient, evolved life forms created back in the day by a single, so slightly godlike being. Yeah, I just
yeah.
didn't want them to be, you know, built by some other race because it seemed to slightly diminish their stature.
Mm, mm.
So yeah,
I suppose the main difference with which is a perfect way to that's yeah, because that's life, isn't it? They weren't built, they kind of evolved or whatever. I guess presuming that the only difference between them and us is that in our world life is carbon based, and in their world it's some kind of metal based
mm,
organic life form that eventually created them. So yeah, it does. It makes them far more. Um, well, in a bizarre way, makes it far more relatable than they would be if they'd just been bolted together.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. But yeah,
Yeah, fantastic.
these movies, definitely, even today when I'm working on something, I feel the movies that made me sort of made me the writer I still am, and made me want to tell those kind of stories, you know,
Yeah. Mm.
exciting, energetic, sweeping, all those things that, just appealed to me when I was a young cinema goer are definitely what I try and infuse my comics writing with, those same elements.
Mm. Mm. What about Bond? Were you a Bond fan?
Oh, Bond was really my first experience of action cinema. I remember being taken by my dad to see Diamonds Are Forever. And,
Mm.
so it was kind of the end of the Connery era, not his best movie. So strangely, my Bond was very much Roger Moore, who, I went to see Live and Let Die, and that sort of slightly blew my mind. Whereas Diamonds Are Forever, I must have really enjoyed, but like I say, it's not one of the better Bond films.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we all have our Doctor Who that we grew up with, and we tend to equate as Doctor Who. Mine's John Pertwee, and
Mm.
then my Bond is Roger Moore. Whether or not he's the best Bond, he was that Bond I sort of experienced at an impressionable age.
Mm. I guess because we are the same age. Interestingly, my Doctor Who is Patrick Troughton, who was the one
Mm,
before John Pertwee, but
yeah.
I mean, but we must have been like on the cusp or
Yes.
something. I
I
don't
mean,
know,
who
but
who I also remember, but I just remember being a much younger kid watching those.
mm.
Patrick Troughton.
And yeah, in terms of Bond, I mean, I liked Live and Let Die. I don't think I saw pretty much. I think I saw all of the Roger Moore films. I kind of didn't like them, but I did like Diamonds Are Forever.
Mm,
And then, like I say, I used to then when they had rescreenings, back-to-back rescreenings in the Empire of the previous Connery ones, that solidified
yeah.
Sean Connery, I think, as my Bond. And but I did like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the
Mm.
only George Lazenby film. I thought that was a really good film.
It is a good film. He's just very wooden as an actor in it.
Yeah.
It's a shame, really. Not that Roger Moore is exactly over expressive, but
Yeah.
yes. I mean, compared to Connery, which of course latterly you come to appreciate as the best of the Bonds.
Yeah.
He just felt a bit wooden, but the story itself is one of the sort of it's the most one of the most faithful to the book as
Mm,
well. So yeah,
mm.
that was a really good one.
Yeah, cool. Um, so and just by name, a couple of other films that were particularly great from back then.
Anything, of course the original Star Wars,
Right.
very, very, a big influence on me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think what the others would have been from around that time. I mean, I loved, on the other flip side of it, I was a huge fan once I could see them of the Godfather movies and
Right.
your Taxi Drivers, and there was a whole other bit of cinema I loved, and I always loved, hard-boiled private eye movies. I, re-
Yeah.
as we've mentioned before, but I remember seeing the Robert Mitchum version of Raymond Chandler's Farewell, My Lovely.
Okay.
And that, even though it's not a film that particularly holds up,
Mm.
again, made a big impact on me at the time. And I don't think it hurt that Charlotte Rampling was the femme fatale in it. And talking of which, of course, I have to mention American Werewolf in London,
Of course you do.
which
Yes.
which which is far and away my favorite movie, possibly of all time. Which
Oh well.
which I can watch and watch again, and it has the added bonus of Jenny Agutter.
Well, there you go. Yeah, what's not to like? Actually, talking of um, not Jenny Agutter, talking of Werewolf in London, American Werewolf in London. When we were making the Luther movie, the
Mm,
Fallen Sun Luther movie, it's on Netflix. And there's a huge, for those who've seen it, will remember there's a huge scene in Piccadilly Circus,
yeah.
and that whole scene was originally written and storyboarded to be in Leicester Square, but then they made, for very all sorts of different reasons, they decided to set it in Piccadilly Circus, mostly logistical reasons. Set it in Piccadilly Circus, and then when I sat down with Jamie to go through it yet again, I mean, I'd had four versions of the storyboards for Leicester Square,
Mhm.
but then when we sat down to talk about the Piccadilly Circus version, the first thing he showed me was a clip from American Werewolf in London. He was like, You've seen this, right?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I've seen that before." He said, "Right, okay, this is our starting point."
Yeah. Yes. I mean,
Just for the chaos that ensues,
yes.
know.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can see that because, once when I saw that Luther movie, you could almost see how much they'd taken from that scene where the werewolf appears in
Yeah.
Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah. That was definitely the
Yeah.
starting
Yeah.
point. It kind of moved on from there, but like, why would you not reference that, you know?
Yeah. So any other sort of
Yes, I mean Blade Runner,
yeah.
huge. In fact, it's interesting to see how much of an influence Ridley Scott was on everything we now understand as sci-fi, really.
Mm,
He totally changed the game. The other film that I really like, which is a bit of a Marmite film, some like it, some don't, which is another Ridley Scott film, is Legend,
mm.
which I remember seeing a clip of that on Barry Norman's film program and thinking, what am I looking at? A, this is gorgeous, and B, that character, who the hell is that?
Mm.
Um, and again, it's not a perfect film in many senses. A very young Tom Cruise in it,
Yeah.
but Tim Curry's Prince of Darkness, is just
Yeah.
stunning, and the Ridley Scott directing, in spite of glitter and bubbles and stuff like that appearing every now and then,
Yeah.
because it's a fantasy fairy tale, but a dark fairy tale, and I just love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I've got to give that.
one film I just to finish off on my list that is from the way back when, which I probably saw, screened or put on TV, but a very old film, which is very much a favorite of mine, is A Matter of Life and Death. It's a Powell and Pressburger
Mhm.
film with David Niven,
Yeah.
which
Brilliant. Yeah.
they don't make them like that anymore.
They don't. They
Probably
don't.
because it's so slow.
Yeah. So, okay, last word on
Yes.
Deadpool Wolverine, which I know we've
Oh
both
no.
seen. Yes, go on. Let's just bring it down from, A Matter of Life and Death to Deadpool Wolverine.
Yeah.
Thoughts in a
Yeah. Okay.
nutshell?
How long have we got?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I said at the top end of this that the two movies that for me will always stand out of the superhero movies and will stand the test of time were the Joker, which has now had a follow on, and the other one was Logan,
Mm.
um, which has kind of now had a follow on, which were which was Deadpool and versus Wolverine, because the movie starts by picking up from the end of Logan and just, I mean, just like vomits all over it. It's a disgusting movie. I hate it. It's a lot of fun. I understand why people like it, but for me, it's an absolute travesty. It's not just referencing its own other kind of family of movies. It's kind of standing outside of it all and referencing the movie industry that's made all those movies. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I think it's horrible, and I think much as in some things he has been very good, I think Ryan Reynolds is single-handedly destroying the movie industry.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, there's a couple of things on it for me. I mean, I enjoyed it. I've got to say, I wasn't as anti it. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think it's, one of those strange beasts that if, unless you get all the references, you'll just be baffled. But,
Mm,
I enjoyed it enough, but it made me want to sort of slightly clean my palate afterwards because it's such a sort of mess, glorious mess, but it's a mess. And, I wanted to go and watch things simpler again afterwards because I just thought, yeah, even the first Deadpool movie is a much simpler,
mm,
cleverer movie. It breaks the
mm,
fourth wall in in measured ways, whereas this one's just one big burst of breaking the fourth wall, and it sort of
mm.
loses the impact. Story wise, there's so many problems with it I can't even begin to list. But it just made me want to. It made me think: have we come this way, and now everything has to be full of internal references? Getting back to Alien Romulus, same thing, laden with references to the first Alien movies, to the point where it's just like, no, they really wouldn't have said that in that circumstance. That's just
Mm.
a check off something else. And I felt that way with Deadpool, Wolverine, that it's just like it's more referential than it is a story. And
Yeah.
I went back the other evening just because I didn't know what to watch, and I thought I want to watch one of the better Marvel movies, and I put on Captain America: Winter Soldier,
Hmm.
which is just a spy conspiracy movie with a little bit of superheroics in it, but
Mm.
it feels like another film I love, and it's even got Robert Redford in it, so I'm sure they were channeling this. But 3 Days of the Condor, which is a great little sort of 70s conspiracy movie like the Parallax View.
Yeah.
There was a vogue for those as well, which I loved. And Captain America: The Winter Soldier just felt like an extension of 3 Days of the Condor, or one of those 70s paranoia, you know, everyone's out to get us movies. And
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, damn, that's what I need more of and less of, I'm afraid, Deadpool Wolverine.
Yeah. Although, if I'm remembering rightly, I mean, I've said this on social media. I'm not really a fan of the Marvel movies because
Mm,
it destroys everything that I loved about, for the most part, destroys everything I loved about the comics when I was reading them. So these are like not my kind of versions of those characters in
mm,
many ways. The films are great in many ways. I have enjoyed some of them. They kind of go a bit too far. I don't like all the one-liner gags. It's like if you're going to make a movie about something, take it seriously, which is why I prefer the Zack Snyder Superman and Batman movies, and a lot of people don't like those. But
mm,
I like them for that because they kind of respect themselves. But one thing about, if I'm remembering correctly, with Winter Soldier is that it starts off as a really good movie, and it's kind of faithful to the whole Captain America legend, and it has references back to the Second World War and all that stuff. It's
mm.
rich with all of that,
Yeah.
but it does end up being one of those, missions where we've got to get the thing in the thing.
Yes. Yeah. No,
And
it's
then
true.
any movie that, I mean, there are good movies that get the thing in the thing, but it's such a male-driven narrative.
Quite possibly this is a good place to end it, where we start talking about movies where it's putting the thing in the thing. So,
Ah, but there's so many of them. Star Wars is guilty of it. I mean, come on.
indeed. Well, that feels like a good place to wrap this episode. And
And we didn't even talk about Hitchcock.
we didn't even, I mean, we could probably fill another 6 hours of podcast with movies. Certainly I could.
Yeah,
But yeah, next podcast we'll be back to where we left off in episode
yeah,
6.
yeah. Wherever that was, I don't
Wherever that
know.
was. I know
We're gonna have to listen back to it or something.
yeah, that's our memory span these days, isn't it?
Yeah, great. All right, Simon. Great chatting as always, and thanks to everybody listening to this. At some point, we've had some questions come in or some comments on the blog on social media. It might be quite nice to pick up on some of those. Maybe next time, maybe not. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.